2 years after my wedding, I was looking through my photo album and realized something heartbreaking. There was not a single picture of my parents on the most important day of my life. They had made their choice crystal clear when Mom called 6 weeks before the ceremony. "We cannot attend your wedding, Charlotte. It would not be fair to Grace if you get married first. She is the one who should have the perfect wedding, and your rushed ceremony would overshadow her plans." The pain of that rejection still cut deep, but now karma had finally come for my perfect sister. Before I tell you how karma finally caught up with my perfect family, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit that like button if you have ever felt like the forgotten child in your family. Subscribe, because what happened to my perfect sister will restore your faith in justice, but you will not believe how it all started. Growing up in my family was like living in the shadow of a golden statue. I was Charlotte, the older daughter who did everything right, but somehow never right enough. My younger sister Grace was 3 years behind me, but light years ahead in my parents' affections. While I earned decent grades and chose a respectable career teaching at the local public school, Grace was the shining star who made honor roll every semester and earned a full scholarship to the most prestigious law school in the state. My parents, Richard and Patricia, lived in an affluent suburb where image meant everything. Dad worked as a financial advisor for wealthy clients, and Mom spent her days volunteering for charity events that photographed well for the society pages. They had built their entire identity around being the perfect family, and Grace was the crown jewel that made that image complete. The favoritism was not subtle. "Why cannot you be more like Grace?" became the family motto that followed me through childhood and into adulthood. When Grace was homecoming queen, my parents threw a celebration party. When I was chosen as Teacher of the Year at my school, they mentioned it briefly at dinner before switching the conversation back to Grace's latest academic achievement. Christmas mornings were particularly painful, with Grace receiving expensive jewelry and designer clothes, while I got practical gifts like kitchen appliances and gift cards. Grace had been dating Stephen Whitmore since her second year of law school. Stephen was everything my parents had dreamed of. In a son-in-law, his father was a prominent judge. His family owned multiple businesses, and he looked perfect in the family Christmas photos. Mom had been planning their wedding since Grace turned 23, constantly talking about venues and guest lists for the wedding of the century that would cement our family's social standing. When I met Jake Miller at a community fundraiser 2.5 years ago, I knew he was different from anyone I had ever dated. Jake owned a small construction business and had built his reputation through honest work and treating his employees fairly. He was kind, funny, and treated me like I was the most important person in the world. But to my parents, he represented everything they feared about my choices. "He is not suitable for our family's reputation," Dad had said when I first brought Jake to Sunday dinner. Mom was more direct. "When will you find someone professional like Grace's Stephen? This carpenter phase needs to end soon." They refused to invite Jake to family events, making it clear that he was not welcome in their carefully curated social circle. Jake and I built our relationship on genuine connection and shared values. He supported my teaching career, attending every school play I directed, and cheering louder than anyone at student achievement ceremonies. While my parents criticized my choices, Jake celebrated them. When he proposed after 2 years together, he did it at the school, where we had met surrounded by the students who had become like family to us both. My parents' reaction to our engagement was swift and devastating. "You are making a mistake," Mom said coldly. "This is not the life we raised you for. You could do so much better if you just waited and thought this through." Dad was more blunt. "We are not supporting this marriage financially or emotionally. You are on your own." Grace's response was typically calculated. I am happy for you, Charlotte, but Mom and Dad have a point about timing. Maybe you should think about what this means for the family. Even in her supposed support, she managed to plant seeds of doubt about my decisions. Planning my wedding became an exercise in heartbreak and independence. Jake and I decided on a charming barn venue that could accommodate 200 guests with a budget of $15,000 that we would pay ourselves. We wanted something beautiful but intimate, focused on celebrating our love rather than impressing anyone with expensive displays. When I asked my parents about contributing to the wedding expenses, their response was immediate and cutting. We are saving our money for Grace's real wedding, Mom said without hesitation. She has been planning her perfect day since childhood, and that is where our resources need to go. You chose to rush into this marriage so you can pay for it yourself. 3 months before the wedding, my parents called a family meeting that changed everything. Charlotte, you need to postpone your wedding until after Grace gets married, Dad announced, as if he was discussing the weather. Grace has been planning her perfect wedding since she was a little girl. You getting married first would steal her thunder and ruin everything she has worked toward. I stared at them in disbelief. I am 29 years old. I should not have to put my life on hold because Grace wants to be first at everything. That is not how life works. If you proceed with this wedding, we cannot support it, Mom said firmly. Grace's happiness has to come first. She is the one with the bright future and the important relationship. Your marriage to this carpenter is not worth destroying her dreams. The pressure campaign began immediately. My parents started calling extended family members, asking them not to attend my wedding because it would encourage Charlotte's selfish behavior. They reached out to my grandparents, threatening to cut contact if they supported my rebellion against the family. Grace played the victim perfectly, telling anyone who would listen that I knew how important being the first to marry was to her, and that I was doing this on purpose to hurt her. Aunts and uncles found themselves caught in the middle, with some quietly telling me they wanted to attend, but feared the consequences from my parents. Uncle Robert called me in tears, saying he had never seen the family so divided, but felt powerless to change anything. Even my grandparents, who had always been my strongest supporters, were being pressured to choose sides. 3 weeks before my wedding, the final blow came in the form of a formal letter from my parents. Dad's handwriting was careful and deliberate. We cannot be part of a wedding that damages our family harmony and hurts Grace's future happiness. When you divorce Jake in 2 years and realize this was all a mistake, do not expect us to clean up the mess you are creating. Mom added her own note. Grace's wedding will be the family celebration we all deserve. Your rushed ceremony is an embarrassment that we cannot endorse. Grace sent her own message, dripping with false sympathy. Maybe you should postpone until after my engagement party next year. Then we could celebrate together as a real family. I spent 3 days in bed crying, questioning everything about myself and my relationship. Had I been selfish? Was I really damaging the family? Should I postpone my happiness to make everyone else comfortable? Jake held me through every breakdown, never pressuring me to choose, but making it clear that he would support whatever decision I made. We are building our own family now, he said gently. Their loss is not our loss. If they cannot see how amazing you are, that tells me everything I need to know about them. The decision to proceed with the wedding was the hardest and best choice I ever made. Jake's mother stepped in to walk me down the aisle when my father refused to come. His family filled the roles my parents should have played, and our friends created the warmth and celebration that made our day magical, despite the empty seats in the front row where my family should have been sitting. On my wedding day, I cried tears of both joy and grief. Joy for the amazing man I was marrying and the life we were building together, and grief for the family relationships I had lost forever. The silence from my parents was deafening, with no congratulations call, no acknowledgement that their daughter had just made the most important commitment of her life. 2 weeks after the wedding, Grace sent a generic card with a $50 gift card to Target. My parents told their social circle that they were too busy planning Grace's real wedding to attend Charlotte's small ceremony. The message was clear. I had been officially written out of the family story. 6 months after my wedding, I had built a life that was more peaceful and fulfilling than I had ever imagined possible. Jake and I bought our first house together, a cozy craftsman bungalow that we renovated ourselves on weekends. I received a promotion to head teacher at my school, finally getting the recognition I deserved for years of dedicated work. The absence of family drama allowed me to focus on relationships that actually nourished me instead of drained me. During this time, I heard occasional updates about Grace through my Aunt Martha, who remained neutral in the family war. Grace had failed the bar exam twice, which my parents were desperately trying to keep quiet in their social circle. Her relationship with Stephen was becoming strained as he questioned her commitment to actually practicing law versus just playing the part of a law student. Aunt Martha also mentioned that Grace had started drinking heavily, which my parents attributed to stress rather than acknowledging any real problems. 1 year after my wedding, everything changed with a phone call that I never saw coming. Aunt Martha's voice was shaking when she called me at school during my lunch break. "Charlotte, you need to know what is happening. Grace has been arrested for embezzling money from the law firm where she was interning. We are talking about $25,000. The charges are being filed today." The news hit me like a physical blow. My perfect sister, the golden child, who could do no wrong, had been stealing money from her workplace. The details that emerged over the following days were even more shocking. Grace had been using her access to client accounts to siphon money for months, funding a lifestyle she could not afford on an intern's salary. When the firm's accounting department discovered the discrepancies, Grace initially tried to blame clerical errors before finally confessing when faced with irrefutable evidence. Stephen broke their engagement immediately, and the local newspaper picked up the story because of his father's prominence in the legal community. The headline read, "Judge's son breaks engagement after fiancé's theft charges." My parents' perfect family image was suddenly front-page news in the worst possible way. The scandal sent my parents into complete damage control mode. They hired the most expensive criminal defense attorney in the state, immediately draining a significant portion of their retirement savings. Dad called in every favor he had with his wealthy clients, trying to keep the story from spreading further through their social circles. But legal proceedings are public record, and the internet made hiding impossible. As more details emerged during Grace's legal proceedings, the family's perfect facade crumbled completely. Grace had been hiding an addiction to prescription pills that had started in law school and escalated over the past year. Court documents revealed that she had been having multiple affairs during her relationship with Stephen, using dating apps and maintaining secret relationships while planning her perfect wedding. Even more devastating was the discovery that Grace had been stealing from my parents for months, using their credit cards to fund shopping sprees and expensive dinners that supported her fake lifestyle. She had racked up over $30,000 in unauthorized charges, forging their signatures on credit card applications, and even taking cash advances against their home equity line of credit. When my parents finally realized the scope of Grace's deception, their world completely collapsed. The daughter they had sacrificed everything for the golden child they had chosen over me had been lying to them about every aspect of her life. The perfect wedding they had been planning was built on stolen money and fake achievements. 2 weeks after Grace's arrest, I received the phone call I never thought would come. Mom's voice was barely a whisper when she said, "Charlotte, we need you. We made terrible mistakes, and Grace needs family support right now. She cannot stay here because reporters keep calling the house." "Now you remember, I am family," I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Dad got on the line, his tone completely different from the man who had written me off 18 months earlier. "Grace is falling apart. She needs somewhere to go while this legal mess gets sorted out. You are the strong one, Charlotte. You always were. We need you to represent the family at the court hearings because you look more respectable." The irony was staggering. Suddenly, my stable marriage and teaching career were assets instead of embarrassments. Jake's blue-collar honesty was preferable to Stephen's privileged corruption. My simple wedding was looking smarter every day compared to the elaborate celebration built on stolen money and lies. Grace's demand was even more entitled than my parents' request. "You owe me this, Charlotte," she said when she finally called me directly. "Family helps family, and I need you to pay for a better lawyer. You have always been jealous of my success, so now you can help me get it back." The moment my family tried to drag me back into their dysfunction was the moment I realized I had the power to choose differently. After 18 months of peace and growth, I could see their manipulation tactics clearly. They had not changed. They just needed something from me now that their perfect daughter had destroyed herself. "You chose Grace over me when it mattered," I told my mother during our final phone conversation about the crisis. "You made it clear that I was not worth your time or support when I was building something beautiful. Now you want me to clean up the mess you created by enabling her behavior for 30 years. The answer is no." My refusal to house Grace or contribute to her legal fees sent my parents into a frenzy of desperation. Dad showed up at my school, embarrassing me in front of my colleagues and students as he begged me to reconsider. Mom started calling Jake directly, trying to guilt him into pressuring me to change my mind. They enlisted other family members to call me with stories about Grace's mental health and suicide threats, trying to manipulate me into feeling responsible for whatever happened to her. But I had started seeing a therapist after my wedding to process the grief of losing my family, and Dr. Sarah Martinez had helped me understand the toxic dynamics I had grown up with. She taught me about golden child and scapegoat dynamics, explaining how families like mine create one child who can do no wrong and another who is blamed for every problem. I learned that I had never been the problem. I had been the solution to my parents' need to feel superior by comparison. Grace's court proceedings became a public spectacle that destroyed what remained of my parents' social standing. She pleaded guilty to embezzlement and was sentenced to 2 years of probation, massive fines, and community service. Her legal career was over before it had really begun, and her reputation in our community was destroyed. The local newspaper continued covering the story with headlines about fallen golden child and family scandal rocks social circles. While Grace was falling apart, my parents were facing their own consequences. The legal fees had depleted their retirement savings, and they were forced to refinance their house to pay Grace's restitution to the law firm. Their former friends abandoned them as the scandal grew, and Dad's business suffered as clients distanced themselves from the family name. Mom's volunteer positions mysteriously disappeared as organizations quietly removed her from leadership roles. 6 months after Grace's sentencing, My parents made another attempt at reconciliation by asking to attend my first wedding anniversary celebration. "We want to make things right," Dad said during an awkward phone call. "Family should be together, and we realize now that we handled things poorly." I gave them a list of conditions for any future relationship they needed to acknowledge publicly that they had chosen Grace over me, apologize specifically for missing my wedding, and respect my boundaries about not discussing Grace or asking for money. Their response revealed that they still had not learned anything from the experience. "We were just trying to protect Grace," Mom said. "She was vulnerable and needed more support. You were always the strong one who could handle disappointment. We thought you would understand." That conversation confirmed my decision to maintain permanent boundaries with my biological family. They were still unable to take responsibility for their choices or acknowledge the damage they had caused. Instead of building a relationship with me, they wanted me to continue being the strong one who fixed everyone else's problems. 2 years after Grace's scandal broke, I was pregnant with my first child and thriving in every area of my life. Jake and I had built a beautiful marriage based on mutual respect and support. My career was flourishing with several teacher awards and recognition for my innovative classroom programs. We had created a chosen family with Jake's relatives and close friends who celebrated our milestones and supported us through challenges. When my parents learned about my pregnancy through social media posts, they immediately began campaigning to be involved as grandparents. "We want to start over," Mom pleaded in a voicemail. "This baby could bring the family back together. We have learned our lessons and want to be better." My response was firm and final. Grandparents earn their place through years of respect and support, not through biology alone. You chose Grace over me when I needed you most. That choice has permanent consequences. Grace, meanwhile, was still living in my parents' basement, unable to find steady employment because of her criminal record. Her attempts at rebuilding her life consistently failed because she refused to take responsibility for her actions or address her underlying problems. The woman who had once been destined for greatness was now a cautionary tale about entitlement and poor choices. The community's perspective had shifted completely over the 3 years since my wedding. People who had once whispered about my inappropriate marriage now saw me as the smart sister who had escaped family dysfunction. Grace became a cautionary tale that parents used to teach their own children about consequences and accountability. My former classmates reached out to congratulate me on building a stable life despite family challenges. My parents' perfect reputation never recovered from the scandal. They were forced to move to a smaller house in a different neighborhood where nobody knew their history. Dad's business never fully rebounded, and Mom's social activities were limited to impersonal volunteer work where her past was not known. The perfect family image they had sacrificed everything to maintain was permanently destroyed. The greatest gift of this entire experience was learning to value myself independently of my family's approval. I realized that love without respect is not real love at all, and that conditional support based on compliance is not worth having. Jake's family taught me what healthy relationships looked like, where support flowed both ways and disagreements were handled with kindness rather than manipulation. As I prepared for the birth of my first child, I felt profound gratitude for the boundaries I had maintained and the life I had chosen. The child who gets everything handed to them often develops nothing themselves, while the child who builds their own success learns skills that last forever. Grace's downfall was not something I celebrated, but it was proof that character and integrity matter more than surface perfection. Looking back at my wedding album now, I no longer felt sad about my parents' empty chairs. Those spaces represented my freedom from their dysfunction and my choice to build something better. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them experience the consequences of their choices, and sometimes the family that raises you is not the family that deserves you. Have you ever been the scapegoat in a family that favored someone else? What would you have done if your parents chose your sibling over you during the most important moments of your life? Share your experiences in the comments below and hit that like button if this story reminded you that your worth is not determined by how others treat you. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family dysfunction and building healthy boundaries with toxic relatives. Please share this video with anyone who needs to hear that they deserve respect and support from the people who claim to love them. Remember, blood does not automatically create obligation, and the greatest victory is not changing toxic people, but changing your own life for the better. Thank you for listening to my story, and may it give you the courage to choose relationships that truly nourish your soul rather than drain your spirit.